RUDTFF.
Once again, here is Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football with your hosts, Dustin Lunt and Jake Trowbridge.
Welcome back to another terrific episode of the Drinking and Talking Fantasy Football podcast. Happy Tuesday evening, everyone who is tuning in live with us. Thank you for joining us yet again. We truly appreciate it. We've got another terrific show on hand this evening. We are talking overperformers. Last week we did underperformers. Guys we thought, we're going to turn the season around. Tonight we're doing overperformers. As I said, players that have outkicked their coverage.
Oh, because pun.
Yeah. You see that? Firing on all cylinders tonight. Pew, pew, pew.
Wow.
Yes. So we're talking about players that who we feel have been overperforming to this point, and that we may feel the bottom might drop out from them. Or maybe not. Maybe we think, hey, they're overperforming, but their situation is so good that they're going to continue to do this rest of the season. We'll find out later in the episode. But first things first, introducing my co-host with the most, Jake Trowbridge. How are you doing, Jake?
Hi, Dustin. I'm great. I want to say up front though, I'm a little scared. I'm a little nervous because you used the phrase "terrific show" twice at the top of the show before we've even gotten into anything. I feel like you're setting that bar very, very high. So I just hope for myself that I can live up to that lofty standard you've set for our listeners.
Well, really, it's terrific for us.
Oh, okay, good. That takes the pressure off.
Yeah.
Fuck
the
you,
bar is way
this
down
is
here.
about us.
The bar is way down here. I'm not comparing us to Fantasy Pros or the Ballers or ESPN. I'm not. No. I'm saying terrific show for us.
Okay,
The bar is here. We're gonna try to get right here, right above it. So yeah,
we can do it. We can.
Oh,
do it,
absolutely. Dustin. I feel like we're already there.
Yeah, you just want to call it? You want to call it a good show and just get the hell out of here?
Thanks everyone for joining. We'll be back next week. No, of course we would never do such a thing. We've got a terrific show tonight. So before we get into it though, Jake, the headline coming out of the NFL, or one of the headlines, I should say, since there seems to be breaking news every other minute here. But Odell Beckham cleared waivers today, and word on the street is the Green Bay Packers are his number one preferred destination.
That's what they say.
As Packers homers on this broadcast, we have specific feelings about this. But why don't you tell me, Jake, how you feel about this?
Well, first of all, I was a little surprised that he actually did clear waivers. The big nuts and bolts of that was the team that picked him off of waivers. If they did, they'd have to pay his $7.25 million salary cap hit. And so nobody could afford it. And so he slid down, and then off of waivers. And now it's open season. And he came out, I don't remember who on his behalf said this, but one of his preferred landing spots was the Packers. I saw the Saints and the Patriots kind of tossed in the mix there too. Maybe another team or two that I'm leaving out. But if it happened, if the Packers can somehow sign Odell and sign him at a reasonable cost, which seems like would be the case now, then you have a 29-year-old guy who hasn't lived up to the expectations that have been set for him the last couple of years. The injuries probably had something to do with it, but if it's all mental, there's the issues with Baker and not being on the same page. If that's just mental and he's still a really top flight receiver in actuality, physically, then you get him with Devontae Adams. I mean, that's really exciting. And no matter how we feel about Aaron Rodgers being a douchebag, we can at least admit from an on-the-field standpoint for the NFL, that trio would be incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. It would be an incredible trio. I'll admit, as a Packer fan, I'm a little nervous if this were to actually happen. While I think Odell probably still has the talent, like that, the talent just doesn't go away. Either age catches up with you or injury or something. which, we've had his share of injuries. So I believe the talent is there, and I think he could help. I mean, he would go and help pretty much, in theory, any NFL team he went to. I worry about the personality conflicts and the diva aspect that he has or has seemed to have had in the past, where he wants the ball. He needs to be the focal point of the offense. If he's not, he gets loud or makes a scene, essentially. There was word with, out of the Browns that, he's maybe a locker room cancer, someone that wasn't a good locker room guy. So I don't know.
I will say, speaking to that point, because a couple years ago, all of that came out and he was it seemed like he was just a giant head case and everything you're talking about with the diva tendencies. But it does seem from his own teammates' perspective, from the Browns teammates, they've all come out and been like, no, he's fine. He's basically just kept his head down and done what he's been asked to do. So my hope there would be that that's true and that it's just a thing of the past for him. And now he's a little bit more level-headed. In his older age, he's gotten more level-headed.
I would hope so. But that would kind of be my only concern, because it seems like, we have one douchebag on the team already right now. And we don't need another one in the locker room. So just one is enough. Overall, we've got a good thing going with this season. While adding a piece like Odell would be great. I suppose at the right price, as a rental for the rest of the season, maybe it would be fine, but I don't know that I would want that long-term necessarily for us.
I don't know that he'd want it long-term if Aaron Rodgers isn't long for the Packers.
This is very fair.
Like, if he's going to be gone next year, and potentially Devontae is going to be gone next year too, that team doesn't just look like a contender all of a sudden.
Right.
So maybe even with Odell there. So that's kind of weird of him to choose that. Maybe he wasn't thinking long-term either, and he just wants to win a ring this year, or have a shot at it.
Absolutely. One other team that I had seen a story about was possibly going to the Seahawks. How would you feel about that?
No. Well, just strictly from a fantasy standpoint, and ignoring the fact that if he signs before this weekend, we would be playing against him, the Packers.
Very true.
That's not great. But, from a fantasy standpoint, you have DK Metcalf, and then you have Tyler Lockett, and you have a quarterback who's not allowed to throw the ball that much. So that mitigates all of their fantasy values across the board. I mean, I would like it for Russell in theory, but if he's not allowed to throw the ball as much as he wants to, then, what's the point for fantasy?
Yeah, I agree. So stay tuned, folks. See what happens. I'm positive he will get signed here within the next day or two of this recording, which we're recording on Tuesday night. I'm sure by the Thursday night game, there's going to be news that he is signing with a team. Like I said, he's still got the talent. He's young enough. He has enough to give to a team where he will make an impact, especially with maybe a contending team looking to get that kind of final piece to push them over the edge. So it'll definitely happen. It's just a matter of when that will happen.
Truth.
So let's move on here. We've got our beer of the week, Jake, provided by you again.
We sure do. This one comes
about this.
Yeah, it comes from Breckenridge. So if you're not familiar with Breckenridge, they're one of the more solid, I'll say, breweries out there. They're from Colorado. And I bought another mix pack. Dustin, we already had like all of the other varieties while we were watching the game on Sunday that came in that mix pack. Some of them not very good. I recall especially that there was like a triple ale in there that was so
that was
bad.
not good.
Neither of us finished it. And our standards are not so high that's a regular occurrence. So that was a little scary, but they did have an amber that was really good, a vanilla porter that's really good. So I was excited. It's a strawberry sky. It's a strawberry Kolsch. I like a Kolsch. Kolsch is a very sessionable, drinkable, crushable beer, whatever you want to call it. And a little bit of strawberry flavor, as long as it's not wild. If it's not like syrupy strawberry, then I tend to like that. I've had a few sips. I enjoy it. How about you?
Yeah, it's not a bad beer. It is a very subtle strawberry flavor. I was expecting a little bit more punch to it, but it's a very drinkable, very solid beer. Great for the summer months. If it's really hot in the middle of summer, like this would be a very refreshing beer for you to have after just mowing the lawn or something.
Yeah, maybe it was a poor timing choice on my part because we're like deep into fall here, and you don't think of strawberry Kolsch as a fall beer, but we're inside. It's not like we're drinking it outside.
Very
we
true.
can make the season whatever we want indoors because we have heat.
Well, some of us do.
That's right. I forgot that you are going through a heater debacle right now.
Yeah.
Well, that was rude of me in hindsight to say that.
I'll let it slide. It's fine. But yeah, it's a fine beer. It's not the best beer we've had on the show, but not terrible either. It's fine.
We haven't done the rating thing in a while. We should do that real quick. Like, let's say out of 5, I personally I'd give this like a 3 1/4.
I'd say like a 2.75.
All right, so we're not either of us smitten with it. I like it a little bit more. If it had more strawberry flavor, I feel like you'd be.
I'd be a little bit
in
more
my
on board.
area.
Yeah, like I said, not a bad beer, but just kind of like, it's fine.
Okay, well, you didn't necessarily love the beer, but I can guarantee you're going to love this next part of the show.
Absolutely.
Here. I'm just going to choose to rip the Band-Aid off myself because I feel it hurts less when I do it than when I let somebody else do it. So we have a beer bet payout, as we always do at the top of the show, and a little refresher for the listener, because part of this they know and part of this is going to be new to them.
Mm-hmm.
Last week's beer bet was supposed to be Aaron Rodgers versus Patrick Mahomes. Well, that's how long ago. That's how long this week has felt. It's been a week since the news came out about Aaron Rodgers testing positive for COVID and being unvaccinated and all of that. Going into Tuesday night, we were like, hey, he's playing. Let's get this beer bet on the books. It'll be very interesting. And obviously we couldn't go through with that because Aaron Rodgers didn't fucking play on Sunday. Instead, Jordan Love played. He finished quarterback 18, by the way. One spot ahead of Patrick Mahomes at quarterback 19. I mean, woof. Woof all over with that one.
Yeah,
but
it wasn't a great offensive showing by either team.
No, it was a defensive slugfest and obviously disappointing for us. But in any case, we decided to switch. So I threw out a couple of options to you before the game started. And we ended up going with Cordero Patterson versus Alvin Kamara. So you had your choice and you took Kamara.
Sure
I
did.
thought this was going to be really close. And it seemed like, based on name value, of course, Kamara should come out on top. It ended up being extremely close.
I kicked the shit out of you. It was great.
You shut up. It was Cordero Patterson with 19.6 points in PPR and Alvin Kamara 20.4. Less than a point difference betwixt them. So
hey, that's a good bet then.
Pretty close. Yeah, I think that was an incredible bet. I think the closest we've had certainly this season, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So as my penance, I had to scramble because I forgot as we were going live here that I had to do this. So I ran downstairs quick to my little bar cabinet and I grabbed the first bottle that I could find. And it is Kettle One Peach and Orange Blossom Vodka. Not my favorite. I'll be honest. I was looking for, I had this like apple pie shot thing, which you've had, Dustin, because we sometimes celebrate a Packers touchdown with that. The missus put it in the freezer and it is just one solid chunk of ice. Unfortunately, it could not hold up. There's not enough booze, I guess, in it to keep it from freezing.
That is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. So I'm going with this. So Dustin, you are a genius / fantasy football amazing person. I forgot even how this is supposed to go. I feel like I'm ruining it for you. You are, hold on, I can figure this out. You are an amazing fantasy football prognosticator / genius.
There you got it. Thank you.
Took me a second time. Cheers to you.
It feels great. I'm not gonna lie. I like that I'm on a little bit of a winning streak here now.
That's two in a row. That's 2 thus far, Shooter.
That's right. So yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, we've got another great bet coming up here down at the end of the episode, so stay tuned for that. We'll see which side Jake wants since I am choosing the bet this week. But before we even get there, we've got our drunk trade of the week. So let's fire it off.
Drunk, hammer, drunk.
Drunk trade of the week.
This week's I'm very excited to talk about. This comes in from Twitter at MN Sports on Porch. This is a repeat submitter. We had one in the off season from this account. So thank you for continually providing us with this great content to riff on. The context here, it's a 10-team Superflex PPR league. I believe this is actually just redraft, but I'm not positive. Here's the layout, the prelude, if you will. To honor the 4-year anniversary of a 4-way trade, we did it again. So all the same people that were involved with that initial trade came back and they decided to celebrate with a follow-up. So here's the original one. Original trade occurred while 4 of us were enjoying a bottle of Slow and Low Rock and Rye whiskey. Basically an old-fashioned in a bottle, they say. All 4 of us took our worst player and simply passed them to the left. Players were, of course, shitty, but it made for a great story. By the way, a fun little side note here. Thanks for keeping fantasy football fun and pushing the trolls in their holes, Dustin.
Well, you are welcome for that.
The words of encouragement. I don't know that I've ever pushed a troll into their hole, but I'm going to start immediately to make good on this promise. So without even getting into the trade, I'll break it down here in a bit. But Dustin, this idea is very interesting because basically each team is assessing who's the worst, most droppable player. And we're just going to shift it over because it probably doesn't matter. What do you think of that concept?
I think it's interesting, but I think you need some sort of parameters in place to say this is my worst player. Because it's a very subjective thing of who, I mean, just because I feel like someone's my worst player, you could probably say, well, that's not your worst player. It's X player over here. You know, it's a very subjective thing unless you're going to go strictly by like fantasy points on the season. But then if they're not in your starting lineup, they're not scoring points for you. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of subjective, I think, of deciding who your worst player is. But as a whole, I kind of like that. Okay, we're just going to take the worst player on our team, ship them off to another player. We're going to get someone shitty that someone else thinks they're a shitty player, get them on the team. Maybe they'll do something for me. You know, the concept itself, I'm intrigued and kind of like, but just some details to be worked out.
Agreed. And I don't have that additional context, unfortunately. It is a very interesting idea, and it adds a little bit of fun and randomness into the league. I do wonder how the rest of the league, the other 6 people involved, feel about this. I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any chance that it's like collusion or anything like that.
No, I don't think so either.
But it is interesting because it's up to the person sending off the trade, of course, who is my worst person. That does eliminate any hinkiness, though. Because you're not going to try and give somebody a better player. You're actually going to look and try and figure out who the absolute worst player is. So, again, I want to refresh here real quick. It's a 10-team super flex PPR league. And now I'm going to go through just the players involved, and then we'll go through team by team. And I'm curious to hear from you who won this trade, so to speak. But the players involved, Devin Singletary, Alexander Mattison, CJ Uzomah, and Taylor Heineke. So the only quarterback in this trade in a super flex league. Now it's 10 teams, so it's not quite as pressing to get a quarterback, but still obviously more favorable. So here's how it broke down. Team 1 sent away Singletary, got Alexander Mattison. What do you think? Even?
Yeah, fairly even.
Yeah, Singletary for Madison. Madison has the higher ceiling in the event of a Dalvin Cook injury. Singletary, you can actually just play week in and week out. You might not love it, but you can play him. Team 2 sent CJ Uzomah, received Devin Singletary. What do you think there?
That's a little bit more interesting. I feel like that's really team dependent. I know CJ Uzomah we'll be talking about later. He's been crushing it as of late. Devin Singletary is a usable person. I would probably take the Uzomah side at this point, but again, it's so team dependent because you're changing positions.
Very true, very true. But in a vacuum, I guess
I'd go with Uzomah.
Uzomah. Okay, so then Team 3 sent away Madison, received Taylor Heineke. This is the one I want to talk about. How big of a deal is it to get a starting quarterback? He's not great. I believe he's quarterback 20 on the season. But
yeah,
still,
it's important. Even in a 10-team league, it's super flex. So you're starting those quarterbacks. He's had weeks where he's been very usable. So yeah, I think that person there won that trade hands down. Whoever got the Heineke.
I would love to know what the rest of their roster looked like to be able to say, Taylor Heineke's my worst player in Superflex. Here, have him. Take him, and I'll just take whatever you're sending back to me. That is bonkers to me. But I digress. Team 4 sent away Heineke, received CJ Uzomah. So here we go. The two best players out of this, in your opinion, without, dependency on the position. Heineke versus Uzomah. You still going Heineke there?
Yes. 100%.
Yeah. Heineke, whoever got Heineke won. Whoever had to trade away Heineke lost. In my opinion, that's as easy as it is. So in terms of traditions, while it's an amazing and fun tradition to just do this shift to the left thing for 4 teams, I could see at this point the other 6 people in that league going, what the fuck, man? You're just going to give away Taylor Heineke, and you might get some pushback.
Yeah, absolutely.
In that league. But that was fun. I enjoyed the submission nonetheless.
So, Jake, before we do the ad read, we got a little shout out here in the chat from our good friend JL, friend of the show, been on the show.
JL Garofalo, one of my favorite people in existence. So hello to you as well. Yes. He called us beautiful boys, BOIS, by the way.
Right.
And I think
that's how you know we're tight.
Is that better? Is boys BOIS better than BOYZ? If you had your druthers?
Ooh. I don't know. That's a great question. We have to put that poll out on Twitter.
We will have to put that poll out. By the way, I think I might go with the Z just because, I'm of that era. I'm a near millennial, but not quite. I appreciate anything with a Z. In any case, before we get on to our overperformers here for the rest of the episode, did want to take a minute to let you know this week's episode is brought to you by Poor Richard's Farm. You've heard us talk about them every episode for the last few months here. Why? Because they are dynamite. Poor Richard's Farm offers 100% grass-fed beef snacks sticks. They don't use fillers. They don't use artificial preservatives. What they use? A whole lot of flavor. Their beef sticks are smoked with real hardwood chips and come in a variety of flavors. You got your barbecue hickory. You got your teriyaki maple. You got your Tex-Mex mesquite, by far my favorite. And then you got the OG original flavor. Right now, if you head on over to poorrichardsfarm.com today, get your free shipping when you buy 3 or more packs of these delicious, all-natural beef sticks.
That's right. Thank you for that, Jake. All right, let's get into this. I have been waiting, and we're finally here. Let's dive into this. So, overperformers. Why don't you start us off, Jake, with your first one? Take a pick of your list. You don't have to start with the quarterback position. Choose whoever you'd like.
And I can
we'll start discussing. Yes.
All right. I want to prelude this. I feel like I'm becoming a king of preludes. I always have to pre-explain myself before I say things so people don't throw stuff at me. But when I say they're an overperformer, what that means to me is this is not the expectation for them necessarily going forward, like you said at the top, but it could be. Now, this first player, it's going to be a shock to people to call him an overperformer. When he came into the season, you had a very high expectation. He has, in a way, met that expectation, but it has not been met in a way that, to me, is sustainable for this year, unless things get corrected. With all of that out of the way, I'm talking about Patrick Mahomes, quarterback for the Kansas City Chiefs. Yes, it's stupid to call him an overperformer. He's the QB6 overall right now. What's wrong with that? Well, nothing's wrong with the result of that. Of course, you still love Patrick Mahomes. Yeah, you wanted him to be a top 2 guy probably coming into this year. That's
probably where you drafted him.
Right? If you didn't take him, in our league, he was taken number 1 overall. So QB6 is not that. So you're disappointed in that. So how can he possibly be overperforming at quarterback 6? Here's why. He should be much worse right now with the way that he's actually played. He is 20th among quarterbacks and adjusted net yards per attempt. Adjusted net yards takes into account all of those stupid sort of randomized factor and just cuts out the fat and says, what's the net yards per his passing attempt? He is nestled between Teddy Bridgewater and Ben Roethlisberger. Those are not two names you want to be in a short list with in a arm strength competition or a yards per attempt competition. That's awful. He's 29th out of 33 eligible quarterbacks in completed air yards per attempt. He has the 5th worst bad throw percentage in the league. So shout out Pro Football Reference for that stat. A bad throw is exactly what it sounds like. Has no chance of really being completed unless your wide receiver goes above and beyond to make that happen. He's 21st in completion percentage. As crazy as it sounds to say, his being a top fantasy quarterback, a top 10, is based more on luck right now than skill. That's obviously not the case historically. That's not what he's been in the last couple of years. He's the dynasty quarterback 1 coming into this year for 99% of people. And he's sitting at quarterback 6, and I still feel like that's too high for him. And if he plays like he did against Green Bay again, just talked about it, he finished worse than Jordan Love, who was quarterback 18 this week. Everybody looks off. It's not all on him. But if I had to take a guess, he finishes lower than quarterback 6 the rest of the way. And it could be like fringe quarterback 1 territory. That's not great.
No, that's definitely not what you are expecting when you drafted him where you did. So, yeah, I don't know. Could you still say he's overperforming, though? I don't know.
I think he is. I think he's overperforming based on where he should be right now. Because, like, watching him play, it's just been so weird. Like, if you just watch him play, you're like, well, that guy's like barely a quarterback 1. And he's I don't know. A lot of his work is just being done by Tyreek Hill, to be fair. And even he's not amazing right now, but he's picking up a lot of the slack. I'm just saying, like, if I had to choose right now, if quarterback 6 is my cutoff for the rest of the year, and I had to go above or below, I'm going below.
Ooh, that's spicy.
Yeah.
But I don't hate it.
Fair enough. Well, who do you want to talk about?
Well, since you led off with quarterback, I will follow suit here. My quarterback, and I will admit, this player I was not very high on to start the season. I thought the hype was too much, and he's proven me wrong so far to date. So I will eat crow on this 9 games into the season here. I will admit I was wrong so far. And quarterback I'm talking about is Jalen Hurts. He is currently the quarterback 2 on the season. Quarterback 2. That is
big.
Bonkers. I did not expect that. I knew he was having a very good fantasy season. Let's be honest, real life NFL hasn't been all that great. He's flashed, but for fantasy purposes, he's doing great. He is in a very tight bunch here with the top 5, all within about 5 points of each other. So, I mean, it is a very tight group there with the top 5 quarterbacks, but the fact that he's up there at number 2 just blows my mind. So the reason why I think he's overperforming is, 1, I did not expect him to perform at this level. I thought he would maybe be a low-end QB1, high-end QB2 for the season. I was not expecting this. But the other thing that really just sticks out when you look at like the stats on the season so far, and granted, he's got 9 games. Some of the quarterbacks have 8 games, so it's not like an even 1-for-1 look here. But he's got 5 rushing touchdowns on the season so far. I don't expect that to be sustainable for the rest of the season. I know he's getting his opportunities. Miles Sanders has been hurt. The Eagles over the last couple weeks have become much more run heavy than pass heavy, which we've seen what he can do with his legs. But like I said, 5 touchdowns already. I mean, he's most likely not going to end up with double-digit touchdowns at the end of the season. You just don't see quarterbacks doing that on a consistent basis. Yeah, Lamar's done it before. Josh Allen did it a couple years ago. but really that's it. I mean, you don't see a ton of quarterbacks hitting that double-digit touchdown on the ground. And then to couple with that, he but he's got only 11 passing touchdowns on the season. So maybe he'll get some more of those passing touchdowns to offset the loss of the rushing touchdowns. But I just don't see him being as efficient and for fantasy purposes as he's been, especially on the ground. And that's why I feel like he's overperforming. At this point, I still think he'll finish as a top 12 quarterback. He will be a QB1 on the season, barring the wheels totally falling off. Like I said, I will eat crow on that, and I will admit he will be a QB1. I just don't see him finishing, as high as he is as the number 2 overall quarterback.
I just really want to see you eat crow. After saying that phrase multiple times, I don't even know how you would attack it. If you would go in feet first, if you would pan fry it ahead of time, if you would just be like Ozzy Osbourne and be a psychopath and eat it outright. I don't know, but I would love to have that be the end of season wrap up for our show. So if you want to start considering that, Jalen Hurts, please continue doing what you're doing. No, I do agree, though. I mean, I was high on Jalen Hurts, mostly just I'll give her a shout out. But Michelle Majou convinced me Jalen Hurts was going to be, a big thing this year. But I didn't think it would be quarterback 2. Yeah, I could definitely see him inside the top 10. And like you said, he's going to finish there. Mm-hmm. He has to basically by default. And he's doing it all by himself. Much to the chagrin of anybody who really wanted Devontae Smith to be a thing this year.
I know. Who do you got next, Jake?
I'm going to shift into running backs here. I want to talk about James Conner, son of Sarah Connor, by the way. Not a lot of people know that. He is currently the RB11 overall. It's wild. I mean, it's wild. Even when you look at points per game, he's currently RB20 in points per game. Cuts out some of the clutter there. And that's still much higher than I had him ranked coming into this season. Dustin, I don't know about you, but I had him outside of my top 35 running backs this year. I think I'd have to go back and check, but I was not high on him. Let's put it that way. And here's the deal. He's been getting it done with touchdowns. It's all touchdowns. 50% of his fantasy points have come from touchdowns to this point. It's fucking absurd. That's crazy. That's fucking absurd. He is tied with Derrick Henry for the most rushing touchdowns in the league. So he's got 10. Derrick Henry's got 10. That's what tied means. But Henry's have come on 219 rushing attempts. Connor's have come on 115. It's basically just half. His touchdown efficiency is ridiculous. You might be obviously excited for him the next couple of weeks because it looks like Chase Edmonds is going to be out for a couple of weeks. He got hurt last game. So, Connor basically should get the backfield to himself unless you believe, Benjamin is going to just come in and basically oversee Chase Edmonds' role, which could be the case. But either way, there's no way this can sustain. You're looking at the Tyler Lockett touchdown efficiency from like 2-3 years ago, where we're just like, this guy can't keep doing this. And then he keeps doing it. But there has to be a point where the floor drops out, where the bottom drops out. And I think that's coming sooner than later. If he gets the full workload too, you got to worry about him standing up to that because, he's had issues with injuries in the past when he gets too much work. And so that's also a concern for me. But it's fucking 50%, Dustin, 50% of his fantasy points on touchdowns.
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Thank you for emboldening me in that. I just wanted to express how nuts that is.
I'm here for you, Jake. Yeah. He was doing kind of what we expected, getting those goal line touches and being the inside the 20, the red zone, kind of bruise the back, get it into the end zone. I don't think any of us expected him to score this many touchdowns. That's the thing. We expect him to be way less efficient on the ground, scoring those touchdowns. Maybe Kyler running in some more of those, using AJ Green, Hopkins, as the big-bodied receivers in the end zone. Yeah, and some of those things just aren't happening. He's getting the ball. They obviously trust him there. So while it could continue, And yes, he's probably going to still continue to score touchdowns, but yeah, it's not going to be at the pace we've seen. And really, that's his only fantasy value. I mean, now at this point with Edmonds being hurt, yeah, he might get a little bit more touches, but I don't know. I don't think, we kind of talked about this, I think, before the season started, where this is one of the backfields where like, well, who's going to get the bulk of the carries and how is this going to look? He's just not built to take, 300 touches in a season, which is why they had Chase Edmonds going between the 20s and then Connor in the red zone. So I believe Eno Benjamin's next on deck there, which is the receiving back. So I feel like, Connor's probably going to keep his role. He might be a little bit more involved, but overall, I think he's going to keep the role he has, and they're just going to kind of plug and play Eno Benjamin at this point. So yeah, I like this one. I mean, the touchdown rate is just wholly unsustainable for the rest of the season.
Stupid is what it is. Dustin, who do you want to talk about next?
This is another guy, came out of nowhere, and you know what? I can't believe that he's going to continue to perform the way he has. And that's Cordarrelle Patterson, currently RB7 on the season. RB7. Wow. That is disgusting. Coming out
Unless
of nowhere.
you roster him, and then it's amazing.
Well, absolutely. But the fact is, he came out of nowhere. Nobody expected him to do anything. This was supposed to be Mike Davis's backfield. And to be fair, while he's getting some rushes, that's not really where he's making his bread and butter here. He's scoring a lot of his points in the receiving game. And I know with Calvin Ridley out now for who knows how long, chances are he is going to be more involved. But we've seen Kyle Pitts come on the last few weeks. Russell Gage I believe he was injured or sick or something, so he wasn't playing, or he was out for a couple weeks. He's getting back into football shape here and getting more involved with the offense. So I feel like I can't imagine he's going to continue to do this for the rest of the year. Scoring touchdowns. I think he's got 5 receiving touchdowns and 2 rushing touchdowns on the season. I just don't see this continuing. He's doing great. It's a great story on the season, but I just don't see this continuing, especially since this Atlanta offense isn't quite what we expected it to be. I think that they can turn it around as the season's going on, and don't spread the word too much, but Matt Ryan has actually become an okay fantasy quarterback now after those first few rough weeks. So with I think a little bit more comfort in this new offensive scheme that they have, you're going to see Matt Ryan hitting the receivers that you expect rather than the running back that's been converted to a wide receiver, converted back to a running back player that we have there in Cordarrelle Patterson.
Now that's interesting because he said, he can't keep doing this. And we've talked about this. I don't know how many times on this show. It feels like every other episode we talk about this, but it's worth talking about because it's so rare and weird. But with Calvin Ridley gone, I want to revisit this question that we had a few episodes ago really quickly. This was from our Believe It or Not episode. And I posited, and this was for you to choose whether you agreed with it or not. I posited Cordarrelle Patterson finishes 2021 with more fantasy points than any other Atlanta skill position player. So excluding Matt Ryan.
Right.
Obviously now Ridley's out of the mix. What do you think of this question now? Can that still be the thing, or is it Kyle Pitts that's going to take over for him? Because Kyle Pitts has been doing very well.
I think it can be Kyle Pitts.
Fair. You don't seem super confident with that.
I mean, it's definitely a lot more interesting with Ridley out.
Because it's a two-man race now.
It is. I mean, and Patterson has quite the lead on Pitts right now. Patterson has 153.7, while Kyle Pitts has 96.6 points. So, I mean, there is quite a spread there. But I think just rest of season, I would rather take Pitts and just his upside on there than Patterson. I don't know. And it might just be my personal bias against Patterson from not really doing a whole lot throughout his career to date.
for his
I
first
just don't believe
20 years of his career.
Yeah, that
in
I
the
just don't feel
NFL.
like he's going to be able to continue this. So, I mean, like I said, maybe that's just a personal bias for me, but I would be willing to admit that if that's the case.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, personal biases are probably going to cloud your judgment of this next guy I want to talk about. So I just want you to understand that this is not a personal attack, Dustin. This is not meant to go against you, but I'm going to be talking about somebody that you're very high on, exceedingly high on, and that is Cortland Sutton, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos. Now, to this point, of course, and we've talked about this in previous episodes, Cortland Sutton has looked good. For fantasy ideas, where people were ranking him coming into the season, it was very low. Cortland Sutton, however, is sitting at wide receiver 27 overall right now. And that is well and good. And maybe, based off a couple of weeks ago, much lower actually than what you're expecting. Because he had flirted with that, mid wide receiver 2 range, between the top 15 to 24 there. So now he's sitting outside that at wide receiver 27. Here's why. It's because Jerry Judy came back. So Jerry Judy, 1 game back, has already started, in my opinion, to kind of relegate Cortland Sutton to a lesser role or a less consistent role in that offense. Because the splits with and without Jerry Judy playing this year are devastating. There is some context missing from this. I know at least one of these games that I'm going to talk about here was just an odd game all around. And so that factors into this. But without Jerry Judy playing, Cortland Sutton had 17.1 fantasy points per game. That's great. That's what you want. That is the Cortland Sutton that we became high on and you started off high on. But with Jerry Judy in the lineup, that drops to 4.1 fantasy points per game. That's just 3 starts. And like I said, there was 1 game that had some hinkiness in there, but that is still devastating. I mean, you can raise that, let's say, to account for some of that weird shit. Let's raise it to 8 fantasy points per game. That's still less than half of what it is without Jerry Judy in the lineup. That makes me nervous because I love Teddy Bridgewater from a real life NFL perspective. I think people ragged on the guy way too much last year in Carolina. I thought he was good then. He actually did sustain 3 top 30 wide receivers in Carolina last year. It was without Christian McCaffrey, but still. But this year in that offense, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be built for all of these guys. Tim Patrick has gotten way more involved than I think any of us believed he would be. Some of that's just because Judy was gone, but even with him in there, Patrick's still getting his. So I got to ask you, Dustin, are you still a firm believer that Cortland Sutton, is that wide receiver 2 level guy for the rest of the year?
Yes. I say without a lot of confidence.
Splits be damned. Get out of here with your facts. I've talked to Joe Rogan about it. He agrees. Cortland Sutton, wide receiver 2 rest of season.
That's right. I mean, it's hard to argue with what we've seen with, like you said, you pointed out the splits with Jerry Judy. He is obviously a very important piece in that offense. And I'm hoping it's just they're trying to get him involved coming back from the injury here. And maybe things will even out a little bit. But maybe not. Maybe, Jerry Judy is the real deal and Cortland Sutton is going to be regulated. Regulated. You got to do it. Regulated. No, it's not
you
regulated.
Do it. Oh, relegated?
There you go.
Relegated.
Thank you for helping me with my words, Jake. He's going to be pushed. Maybe he is going to be that number 2 wide receiver on the team and not the alpha that I was expecting. I think he has this complete skill sets to do it. And maybe part of it too is he's just still maybe having a little bit of recovery from that ACL injury and not quite confident 100% with that knee yet. So maybe that's part of the issue. I don't know. But yeah, it's hard to argue with you in these stats that you shove in my face. Just besmirching my beloved
numbers.
Cortland Sutton. But yeah, like he's someone to be concerned about. Definitely. Definitely someone to keep an eye on, a close eye on as things progress here the rest of the season.
Fair enough. And I will be doing just that. And I'll come back with different stats if I have to. But who else do you want to talk about tonight?
So I've got Marquis Brown as my wide receiver. Excuse me, my wide receiver for this week. Overperforming. He's currently wide receiver 6 on the season in only 8 games. So he's got less games. So you could say, oh, he could be even higher. Yeah, he could. But here's why I feel like he's overproducing. So he's got 6 touchdowns on the season, which nice. That's fairly average as far as what the top wide receivers are doing. But he's only done it on 80, not 80. I'm looking at the wrong line. My eyes. 69 at a very nice 69 targets. When you're looking at the rest of the players in the top 12, with the exception of DK Metcalf, everyone is in the 70s or 80s, or you get Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill, which are over 100. He's just not quite getting the receptions or the targets. I mean, that you're seeing kind of that alpha wide receiver that is typically in the top 12 for. While he's got a good catch percentage, it's right in line with everyone else. I just don't know that there's enough volume in that offense to sustain him. And then couple that with the fact that Rashad Bateman is back. He's been getting more involved in that offense. He's looking like the real deal. He has flashed. He's looked really good. I don't know that this offense can sustain 2 wide receivers and Mark Andrews with Lamar running the ball like he does. I just don't know that that's going to happen. And I do think Rashad Bateman is a better wide receiver than Brown is. So I expect him to be more involved, which means Brown's usage will fall off. So that's why I feel like he's overperforming and is not going to kind of sustain this production that we've seen the first half of the season through the end of the year.
I agree 100% with Rashad Bateman creeping in the back door, because he is one of my ideal. If he's on waivers, you pick him up. If you're in a deep league and you can trade for him, trade for him. Because since he's gotten back in the 3 games he's played, he's been amazing. He has 20% of the target share. What is nice with Brown, at least, by the way, I agree he's overperforming and he's going to drop a little bit. I don't think he'll fall off the face of the earth. But it is nice because it just goes through 3 guys with the Ravens. And it's the 3 you mentioned. It's Marquis, it's Rashad Bateman, it's Mark Andrews. But at least you know the clutter is gone. Like, nobody else is getting involved there. Sammy Watkins, get the fuck out of here. We know you are not going to be involved. So, that part's nice. But, yeah, if I had to guess, I'd say he finishes right as a fringe wide receiver 1. Not where he's at now, but I don't think he drops like crazy.
I would say probably high-end wide receiver 1, maybe like 14, 15, right around there.
High-end wide receiver 2.
2, yeah, sorry, 2.
Give me 2. Utah, give me 2.
That's right.
Fair enough. Anytime we can work in a Point Break reference to this fucking show,
you have to.
I'm the happiest man alive. Almost as happy as when I get to talk about CJ Uzomah, who I'm going to talk about as my final entry here into the Overperformers. CJ Uzomah, I mean, God love him, because he came out of nowhere. He had like one real big blow-up game last year, and then nobody thought about him again because he got injured. And then he came in this year, and he's like, fuck all you guys. I'm going to keep doing this. He's currently the tight end 10 overall. I know that that's meaningless. We talk about it all the time. Anybody outside like the top 4, who even cares? But it is still weird that CJ Uzomah is tight end 10 overall. And here's why. He has he has only 28 targets this whole time. He's played 9 games and only had 28 targets. That's 1 more than Dawson Knox, who's only played 6 games. And that was already kind of high for Dawson Knox based on what he did the previous year. He has 5 touchdowns despite only having 2 red zone targets. So that's, for a tight end, that is really impressive. I mean, that's good. Great. Congratulations to you, CJ, for doing that. That's really good. But what I don't think is sustainable, he has the 6th highest yards per target among all pass catchers. not just tight ends, everybody who's out there catching passes. 6th highest yards per target. How the hell does that happen? Well, when you only have 28 targets, it makes it a little bit easier. But a lot like James Conner, where we talked about, it's crazy where his fantasy points have actually come from. 52% of Uzama's fantasy points came in just 2 games. 2 out of 9 games. That's where more than half of your production came from. So that kind of explains it. If you didn't have, or if you had him started outside of those 2 games, you're like, well, here's every other fucking tight end that I've ever considered starting. Just miserable, nothing production. If you were lucky enough to start him for those 2 games, awesome. Because, that probably helped you quite a bit win that week. But there's no way that Uzama continues doing this, especially in that offense, because I hate saying it, but I have to say it. There's a lot of mouths. There's a lot of mouths to feed in that offense. T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. Probably should have flipped those names in order of hierarchy, but Tyler Boyd, even Joe Mixon, who I know we hate, but you have to admit he's been doing work. So,
I really wanted to put him on my overperformer for running back this year, just because my dislike for him. But I had to be honest with myself and try to be unbiased about it, and realize that no, he's actually doing what everyone expected him to do all these years. He's finally just putting it all together. So I got to give him credit for that, even though it doesn't change the fact I don't like the man. But
you're the bigger man. You're the better man.
Yeah, I guess.
You can sound confident in that. It's not harder to be the better man over Joe Mixon. Let's be honest.
Well,
who do you want to hit on for your tight end?
All right. So my tight end is Hunter Henry. I did a quick pivot here, looking at the list, changed it to Hunter Henry. Similar to Uzama, he's only got 38 targets on the season. Not that many compared to the rest of the tight ends. Yeah, he's number 8 overall. And again, it's blah, blah, blah. Tight ends suck outside the top 3. But again, he's got the 5 touchdowns, just like your boy there. So he's very touchdown dependent. That Patriots offense, I just don't know that that's going to continue for him with so I just don't believe that he's going to continue to get these touchdowns and he's going to end up with 10, 12 touchdowns by the end of the season. I think that's going to slow down. They'll drop him down in the ranks. Not much more to say there.
Is any of that to do with your holding out hope for Jonnu Smith, or is this independent of that?
It's independent of that. There is no hope for Jonnu at this point either, which pains my heart, but it is what it is.
Cling to that.
I know.
I was hoping.
I know. So, let's move on. You feel like we got all of our performers out of there? Is there anyone else you want to touch on real quick?
No.
Okay.
No.
All right. Fair enough.
I think we did it.
Fair enough. All right. So let's go to our start of the week and let's do our review from last week here. So Jake, you had Aaron Rodgers versus Kansas City. Wah, wah, wah.
I'm a fucking curse, Dustin. I'm a curse with this segment here. Watch out, new guy. Because the week before that was Robert Tonyan, and then he got hurt. So, I just need to stop picking Packers players to do well. I think.
Well, yes, you should do that.
But also, just, look out, new guy.
Mm-hmm. And then I had Hunter Renfrow versus Baltimore as I'm flipping between screens here. Trying to see where exactly he finished on the week.
Very, very high. I'll tell you that. He was a top 12 guy this last week. So for that, you deserve a million kudos.
Finished as number 11 on the week. So I like that a lot. That was a good call. Number 1 wide receiver on the week.
Hunter frickin' Renfrow. This is why you listen to this show here, folks, for Dustin and that sweet ass insight.
That's right. So let's hope I can keep the good times rolling here. My start of the week for this week is Mike Giseki versus Baltimore. I really like the matchup. Baltimore is second to last in the league versus tight ends. They are giving up on average 18.4 points per game to the tight end position.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. And Mike Giseki has been coming on as of late here, especially with Tua back in the fold, although we don't know what's going to happen with Tua moving forward here. But he has been coming on as of late as the season has progressed, doing very, very well. So I'm going to think that's going to continue here, especially with this juicy matchup.
It is
Jake?
Juicy. It's very juicy, although I feel weird saying that word in relation to it gives me the moist kind of
vibe.
Inclinations there. Yeah, it's a little that's just me. And my start of the week, this is a little bit contingent, so I hate to do that. I hate to be that guy, but it doesn't look like Zach Moss is going to start this next week. He left last week's game with a concussion. If that's true, if Zach Moss is out, Devin Singletary is a smash running back against the New York Jets. First and only time I'll use that phrase for Devin Singletary this year because it hasn't been great for him. But the Jets are absolute garbage against running backs. They are the worst in the league. So it's a similar thought process with the Ravens against tight ends. The Jets against running backs, you start them. So when Zach Moss was out last week, Singletary played 48 of 67 snaps, ran 35 routes. He didn't get a ton of work rushing, weirdly enough, but he made up for it with the passing work. He was very involved, got 8 targets on the day. So,
although that was just a weird game, though, too.
Oh, very true. And a disconcerting one if you're a Bills fan, by the way.
Absolutely.
Dear Lord, did you expect to lose to the Jags? I hope not. Because then, what are you doing? But, point still stands. If they're in a better game script, he'll get more rushing work. If they're in a worse game script somehow, I can't imagine how, but if they are, then he'll see that receiving work. So you're safe either way.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. I like it. Okay. One last thing to cover here before we sign off. And that's our beer bet for the week. So I chose the 2 players this week. Jake, it is your job. I will let you choose which one you want here. And we're just going to go PPR points. It's just straight up PPR points. We've got Noah Fant versus Dallas Goedert.
Goedert or go home. I am going to side with the Noah Fant side here, presuming he's, healthy. He didn't play last week. Albert O played in his seat and did not do well. So if Noah Fant's back, the Eagles are also terrible against tight ends. They're right there with Baltimore. So
they are
I'll take
last.
Fant. Yeah.
They are first worst, as some people might say.
Sure.
Where Denver is number 2 versus tight ends. So
that's a tough straw to draw.
It
here.
is. It is.
Dustin.
It is. But I figure, Fant's been underperforming a little bit versus expectations. I expect Goedert to be more involved here as the season goes on. So that was the whole impetus of this one here. So
fair. And I've got the injury concerns to deal with, which you don't. So that adds a layer to it for sure.
Mm-hmm. And obviously, if we find out come the weekend that he's not going to play, we will pivot to a different beer bet, of course, just to make it fair, because we don't want to be doing shots because of injuries. That's just not.
Fuck no, you don't victory lap shots, or you don't victory lap injuries in any way, even if it does involve shots.
That's right.
We're classier than that.
Yes, well, we try to be. So that will do it for this week's show, folks. Look at us keeping it right about an hour this week. Look at it. We're good for a change. But yeah, your weekly reminder from us: check your waiver wire for drop players. You never know who's going to get dropped with all these buys going on. And speaking of buys, you've got Chicago, Cincinnati, Houston, and the New York Giants all on bye this week. So take them out of their lineup, please, because they will score you no points.
That's true.
And of course, go out, give us a rate and review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you rate and review your podcast. It helps us become more accessible to everyone. Tell your friends, tell your family, shout it from the rooftops how awesome we are and where people can find us. We have our YouTube page here where we stream every single week. If you're not subscribed to that, please subscribe, hit the bell. It'll alert you when we go live. which is great because then you get to see our beautiful faces that were made for radio.
Handcrafted for radio, for sure.
That's right. And if you want other great fantasy advice, go check out our Twitter page. We will answer any questions you have. If you DM us, tag us in polls or questions, trade questions, you name it, we're there for you. That's at Drinking Fantasy. Jake, where can folks find you out there?
They can find me at Jake Trowbridge.
And you can find me at FF Dusty Dog. And until next week, folks, keep drinking and talking fantasy football.
Cheers, FFers.